Thanks for tuning in to The Leadership Beat, a Bates Communications original podcast series exploring leadership trends and inspiring leaders to innovate and think differently.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Leadership Beat. I'm Jacqueline Brodnitsky, Director of Leadership Coaching at Bates, and today I'm joined by Pat Murphy, CEO of John Hancock Retirement, the U.S. retirement business of Toronto-based Manulife. Welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. I think I'd like to give a brief introduction so our listeners know a little bit about you. And so a little bit about John Hancock first. As of the end of last year, 2019, John Hancock serviced over 50,000 retirement plans with over 2.8 million participants and over $181 billion in assets under management. Now about you, Pat. Pat has enjoyed a terrific career over the past 30 years in the retirement plan market, working for well-known companies like Putnam Investments, American Express, and New York Life. For the past 6 years, he's led all aspects of the retirement services business at both New York Life and, after the business was acquired, at John Hancock. The integration of the New York Life and John Hancock retirement business has been a particularly interesting challenge in a highly competitive market with tight scrutiny and aggressive fee compression. In the midst of this, Pat had a health challenge which has deepened and fine-tuned his leadership style. In his spare time, he's a member of the board for Many Hopes, an international organization dedicated to rescuing housing and educating Kenyan children. He's also a career counselor and mentor of student athletes at his alma mater, Brown University. Pat, welcome to the Leadership Beat.
Thanks.
I'm always curious. It's always so interesting to hear about a leader's roots. What were your experiences growing up that shaped you to be the leader you are now?
Well, there's a lot to that, right? And I could go way back, but I think what has really shaped not only my leadership style, but my drive for the business that I'm in has been my upbringing. I'm one of 6 kids, and my mom was really forced to raise us on her own after my parents divorced, and then my father died shortly thereafter, and left us with no savings, no life insurance, nothing. And so we were poor. We were plunged into poverty because of those circumstances. And we relied on the charity of strangers and social organizations in town where we lived. And I didn't really want for a lot because we didn't have a lot, but we had each other and we had our family. And my mom went back to work, and she just was always a really positive person in terms of just like, listen, life is life and it doesn't owe you anything, and sometimes it's going to knock you down and you have choices. You can stay down or you can get up. And so she just chose to get up, and that's how she taught us, that getting up was the better choice. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, fast forward, so we had difficult times, and I had a great opportunity to go off to college, and I played football in college, which was my kind of way into Brown University. And I quickly learned about the financial services industry. I took economics courses and business courses, and learned about financial services and these things called life insurance, and realized that what happened to my family doesn't have to happen to any family, really. It's tragic enough to lose, a family member, a breadwinner, but then to be plunged into poverty as a result of that kind of compounds the tragedy, if you will. And I realized that with the right kind of planning, the right kind of help, and the right kind of tools, no family ever has to be plunged into poverty. And so I got into this business after college, not to help people become rich or to develop wealth, but I really got into this business to help people avoid becoming poor. And it was only later in my career that I realized the power of what we were doing in the retirement plan business to change people's lives, to change the trajectory of their lives, to build wealth, to build security, and not only changing that individual's life, but changing their family's trajectory and maybe generations of families' trajectories from a financial perspective. And so I became passionate about making a difference in people's lives and using my work to do that.
That's great. Your mom sounds like a super strong woman.
Yeah, she was.
How did the way she brought you up, how did that shape your leadership?
My mom was a good person. She was a tough person. She had high expectations. But she also was really focused on making sure that we were grounded. So, we didn't have a lot, so we didn't expect a lot. But that never stopped her from making sure that we stayed humble and had a sense of humility. So one of the things that she said was, never be afraid to ask for help, but never become so arrogant and self-centered that you refuse to lend help to someone who's reaching out their hand for help. So it was that was really an important lesson that I learned over time. I don't think I got it right away, but certainly over time I really came to understand what she was teaching us when we were kids. And so it really is how that's changed my leadership style or influenced my leadership style is really understanding that even though I'm the leader of this company, I can't do all this on my own. I need help, and I have to be willing to ask for help when I need it of my leadership team or anybody else in the company. And also making sure that when someone does reach out for help, that I'm willing to provide that help, and not see their asking for help as a sign of weakness, but asking for help as a sign of strength, and having confidence and conviction and knowing what you can do and can't do, right? Nobody's perfect. We talk on my leadership team about the imperfect leader and how we can't know everything about everything. And so we have to rely on each other. And so that's really turned into a very collaborative, team-oriented leadership style, but also one in which I view leadership as a servant role. And so I'm seeking out people who are looking for help, because that's, I think, a big part of my job as a leader of the company is to help people show up here every day and be their best.
I'm curious about the dynamics of your leadership team a little bit, talking about reaching out and asking for help. Many leaders on leadership teams find that it can be a competitive environment. And so how do you foster that in your team, the non-competitiveness?
Yeah, we don't really call it out in terms of being hypersensitive to people competing with each other, because I think there's a natural drive for people to want to succeed and compete, right? We're always comparing ourselves to others, right? And instead of calling that out as a negative, what we really do is focus on the qualities that we really want as a team. And so we talk about teamwork. And it's really important that no one on the team feels that they're more important or less important than other members of the team. And that's critical, including myself. I happen to have the cool title, and maybe I have the ultimate in accountability for the firm, but I'm just another member of the team. And I want to make sure that the group understands that and treats me that way as well. And so teamwork is really critical. Accountability is really critical. So in personal accountability and team accountability. And so, when you think about the competitiveness of the individuals within the team, we hold ourselves accountable for getting things done, which that kind of those goals are drive the competitive nature of the individual. But most of the goals are team goals. So everybody has to pull together to accomplish those team goals. We don't want a bunch of individual stars. We really want a team working collectively. The other thing we talk about is that, and this is something that I've learned over time through my mom, through great mentors I've had throughout my career, is that every single person that we run into in life knows something that we don't know. Everyone. And so if you approach people that way, it instinctively creates this curiosity for that other person. And so you really look at each relationship and think, I can learn something from everyone that I run into throughout my day, throughout my life. And so that I think helps create a respect within the team. That I might have a big role, but everyone on my leadership team, every one of the employees that we work with, every one of the customers that we serve knows something that I don't know. And so I can learn from them. And that's what we strive to do. We strive to learn from each other every day. And that, I think, also helps dampen the super competitive nature that can happen sometimes.
That's great. It's so interesting, Pat, because we measure aspects of a leadership team's performance to help them become more high-performing teams. And one of those important aspects is curiosity. So that's wonderful that that's what you're fostering on your team.
It has to be that way.
Yeah.
The other part of it, too, the last thing I would say is that we are proud of the work that we do, and we have really smart people that work for us. But we want to have this level of humility so that we know, although we think we're smart, we don't ever want to think that we're the smartest ones in the room all the time. And so there is this environment of continuous improvement. So we're good, but we can always be a little bit better. And that's where you want to really foster the competitiveness, right? Because you want people to be better. You want them to be looking not over their shoulder, but looking ahead and trying to improve the way we do things. But as long as we're doing that collectively as a team, and nobody stepping over each other, that's the important part.
Our research has shown that humility is a really important aspect of leadership for driving innovation. And it sounds to me like your humility and the humility you ask your leaders to have enables that sense of innovation on your team. And I imagine it spreads down through the organization.
I hope so. I think our group is really creative and innovative, and in big ways and in small ways, and I think that's part of it, right? So part of that stems from this drive to have this continuous improvement type of environment. Part of it stems from this intellectual curiosity that we foster within the team. But also, I just think that understanding that we don't have all the answers, right? We don't have all the answers, and I think it puts too much pressure on people to expect them to know everything about everything at every moment in time, right? And even when I'm saying that sentence, I just feel like this, and that's actually, honestly, you mentioned a health scare that I had, several years ago. That was part of what was driving that, was my own sense that I had to be perfect and know everything, and the stress that caused, and the health effects that stress had on me was severe. But the other thing too is just we want to make sure around humility. We just want to make sure that our team understands, coming from the fact that we can't know everything and that we can always learn from others. I think it's a really important thing to emphasize when you're talking with people.
Yeah, that really is. So I'd love to hear, how did you come to the realization that you were putting this pressure to be perfect on yourself? Because a lot of people can have a health scare and then continue on putting that pressure on themselves. So how did you come to that realization?
I ended up in the hospital. With a heart condition that was not related to any physical ailment whatsoever. And I had a great cardiologist who just looked me in the eye and said, "You're killing yourself with your head. You're putting too much pressure on yourself. This is stress that will kill you if you don't get this under control." And so what that did, obviously it was a wake-up call. And I started to examine what were the sources of stress in my life, and then how to remove those sources of stress, and where they couldn't be removed, how to mitigate the effects of that stress, and really how to center myself on the things that I could control, the things that were important, because not everything that comes at us throughout the day is as important as others, right? And some of it is just noise. So how not to be distracted by it, and stay focused on the work that we're doing. And I say the work that we're doing, but it doesn't just apply in the workplace, it applies in life, right? And so really doing a lot of self-reflection and understanding what I needed to stop doing that was exacerbating the stress, what I needed to start doing to help, relieve the stress. And so some of it was just basic. I learned to meditate. I learned to spend more time in nature. I learned to breathe more deeply, become more appreciative of life, and all the things that I have in life. Probably one of the biggest things I did was I learned to ask for help. I really learned, and when you're sitting, you're the youngest person in a cardiac unit by at least 20 years, and the only one who's actually conscious in that unit, you suddenly understand what vulnerability is really all about, and certainly having a doctor tell you that you could potentially, not be alive in a year. So that vulnerability of that moment allowed me to actually feel comfortable being vulnerable in leadership situations and being able to say, help, I need help. And there is a level of trust that comes with that too, right? You have to trust that the person you're asking for help is going to help you without judgment, and that's really important, And so you got to assume good intent. You really got to let yourself out there, and that's hard to do for people. And so I decided then and there that I was going to, if I wanted people to be vulnerable and to be trusting, that I needed to, and if I wanted them to meet me in the middle with this, then I needed to get in the middle and show them where it was. And so that's really how that health scare impacted me as a human being, but also as a leader.
You have to be really strong to be vulnerable.
I know, right? And it's intuitively, people don't think of it that way.
Right.
People think of vulnerability and asking for help as weakness, and that's where we have to change the narrative around that, so that people can really truly understand that they don't have to do it alone, right? There's a great proverb that I like, and it's supposedly an African proverb, but I'm sure somebody can fact check this for real, but I've used it a lot with my team. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And so we talk about that, and we commit to going far, and we can go much farther together. And so the vulnerability that comes with having a team that you have to rely on and should rely on and ask for help quite often is really important to that long-term success, I feel.
Yeah, we use that proverb a lot as well in our work, yes, because when we talk about things like inclusiveness and humility, and so love to hear, you mentioned meditation, getting out in nature, breathing. What has that done for you? What is that, adding those sorts of things into your life?
It's provided an opportunity for me to pause and to get my head around whatever it is that I need to be thinking about and decisions that I need to make. It really does allow, I think it's important, right? With technology advancing as quickly as it has, and at this frenetic pace that it continues to improve and expand in our lives, there's so much expectation that everything happens instantaneously. And so for me, meditating and learning how to breathe and getting outside gives me that chance to pause and really reflect and really think through and analyze situations. And this is a little bit of a Zen-like thing, but I say this to our team a lot as well. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And I used that with the kids when I was coaching football. I coached 10 and 11-year-old boys in youth football for 10 years. And I would use that phrase with them. And they were like, "Coach, I don't understand." And so we would do a lot of drills where we would walk, not run. And so we would walk through the drill, and then as we were walking through the drill, we were coaching and guiding and really helping them understand the things to look at when a play is unfolding. And then they go, "Oh yeah, okay, I see that now." And so when you started to run at full speed, those things became second nature. And so they were reactionary rather than having to think too much. And so I remember one of the boys, we were in a championship game, and he's like, "Coach, I finally get it. It feels slow out here on the field now because I can see things." I was like, yes. So it's, I think that's really what breathing and meditating and getting out in nature does for me. It helps me slow things down so I can eventually speed back up.
Yeah. Well, full disclosure, I'm a huge proponent of that, having a 15-plus year meditation practice as well.
Yeah.
It's life-saving.
Yeah, and I will be honest, I didn't believe in it. I thought it was silly, and I couldn't, part of the problem was I couldn't get out of my own head enough to meditate quietly. There was always something in my head, and I was just like, "Oh, this isn't working. How is this going to make me calm?" And I was getting stressed out while trying to be calm. And this is really part of what the doctor said. It's like you're just killing yourself with your mind, and you have to learn to get this stress under control. And outwardly, I had everything going for me. I was, running a company and merging into another company and making this bigger, better, stronger organization, and we had a lot of success from a business perspective. And inwardly, I was destroying myself and afraid to tell anybody about it. Mm-hmm. And that's the other part of it was really even like compounding the stress. Just thinking that I had to figure it out on my own, and was afraid to tell anybody that there was like a kink in the armor.
Right.
And
so your body showed you.
I had no choice.
Yeah.
I had no choice. Yeah, my body just gave out on me. And I had no choice but to make it right. And,
yeah.
It got knocked down, and I had to get back up.
That's incredible. How did you, I'm curious just for a second, would love to hear, how did you get past that point in your practice where you could see your mind slowing down a bit? What was that point for you in your meditation practice?
Yeah. The way that it manifested itself for me really was in the form of pain relief. And that, because I had a practitioner who helped me. I played football in college, and I had multiple surgeries and injuries, over the years. And so, I have bad knees, bad shoulders, and experience a lot of pain on a regular basis. And so she taught me how to slow my breathing down to a point and then focus on where the pain is, and I could breathe the pain away without any drugs, without any other procedures. And getting to that point, I was able to slow my heart rate down to a very low point. And it was really less of an aha moment, and it was really a series of aha moments that then culminated in me realizing, like, wow, I can actually do this. And realizing that by focusing in on the pain and with the breathing was slowing everything down. It was slowing my heart rate down, it was slowing my mind down, it was slowing my thought process down. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm not in any more pain. And then I started being able to apply that to just thinking through other situations as well.
That's great. What an incredible story. What power.
Yeah. And I even hear myself saying it now, and I was like, wow, that's kind of weird how it works, but it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. It sort of ties into, we've worked with John Hancock for the past 4 years, and I know your reputation is as a smart and direct, yet supportive, kind, and humble leader. And so, as your role has elevated, how have you maintained this leadership style?
So first of all, thank you for those kind words. I think my team might not think all of those things of me every day, because I do have high expectations of myself and others. And sometimes, this is just human nature, right? Sometimes those expectations can be a little unreasonable. And what I tell my team, and it goes along with the conversation we were having earlier, is like, listen, I'm not perfect. I'm going to have my good days and my bad days, and sometimes, I'm going to bring something to the office that happened outside of the office. It's going to create a response in me that might not feel right to you. Call me on it. We talk about teamwork, accountability, and continuous improvement. All of that applies to me too, right? So, I happen to be the quarterback of this team, but not all the time. Sometimes I have to step back and carry the water, just like anybody else, right? And then if I'm doing something that doesn't reconcile with the things that I've articulated as being important to me, then the team has the right, and I would almost say the obligation, to call me out on it and hold me accountable for that. And they do. And I don't always like it, but we talk about that too. Like, I don't have to like everything that's said by the team or by our employees or by our customers. I'm a human being. I'm allowed to have those kind of reactions, but it doesn't mean that those reactions are right. And so I need to be held accountable for doing the right thing as well.
That's great. It sounds like you're very authentic about that, and that people aren't penalized for disagreeing with you.
No, I think it's
important.
It's almost, I don't want to use the word penalized, but I'd almost be disappointed if they didn't disagree with me from time to time. Because I know, I'm a fiery guy. I can be very passionate about the things that I believe in, but that doesn't always make it right, or it doesn't always make it the best thing to do at the moment, right? So I think the team is really good. I'm proud of the team that we have. I think it's a fantastic group of people. It's really diverse in terms of the backgrounds and experiences that they've had, and we have introverts and extroverts and very deliberative thinkers, and people who are just like quick and quick with an idea, and there's a lot of mutual respect there, and there's a good amount of camaraderie and joking, and at the end of the day, though, we know what we're here for. We're here to make other people's lives better, and we're focused on delivering on that.
That's terrific. What is your advice to someone who wants to rise to the C-suite?
I would actually just have them really reflect on why they want to rise to the C-suite. That's an important element of I think, a journey that someone goes on to get to where I'm at. And I will tell you, the first time I had an opportunity to be a leader, I failed at it. I wasn't good. I wasn't a CEO at the time, but I was a leader of people, and I became the boss. And I was a great individual contributor. I was really good at my job. And so the management team took me out of an individual contributor role and had me be the leader of the team that I was a team member of. And I thought, well, if they are making me the leader and they're saying that I'm really good and the model for how this should be done, then everybody should just do the job how I did it. And so it became an ego thing for me. I was the boss, and now I am going to show all these other people how to do it my way. And it was miserable for everybody involved. It was miserable for the team. It was ultimately miserable for me. And it was a pure ego-driven ascension into that role. And so I really think if people are considering being a leader of people, they need to ask themselves why. Why do they want to do that? Because people, I've learned by mistake, people don't want to be bossed around. They don't want to be managed, right? People want to be led and inspired and coached and mentored. And that's fun. And that's what actually makes leadership for me now so enjoyable. And I really view it as the leader as a servant, and I serve the people in our company, not just our customers, but our employees and my leadership team. My job is to serve them and make sure that they have the ability to come to work every day and do the best they can do, but also be their best versions of themselves and their authentic selves. And it's the only way that I think a company really works, is if everyone can show up and be who they are and not have to flip a switch when they walk in the doors here. I just don't think that whole work-life balance discussion that we've always had in this country for so long, I think is a little outdated, and I think there's more of a work-life harmony of some kind, where you just are who you are and you can be celebrated for who you are. And so if anyone out there is thinking about getting into the C-suite or becoming a CEO, again, I know I'm being a little bit repetitive here, but I think you have to ask yourself why. What is your goal? And if it's just an ego thing, then you will fail. Maybe not right away, but eventually. And failure isn't necessarily seen as not being good at the job, but I think not being happy with the job, happy with the role. Because I think being a leader of people with a big ego ultimately creates a lot of stress, a lot of, I think, lonely days, because you I think by nature, if you are ego driven, you don't have the curiosity, you don't have the trust, you're never going to be vulnerable. And so, and that just has this cycle of you always have to think you have to figure it out on your own. And it's really just a self-perpetuating, self-grinding kind of a mentality.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because I think you've really hit at some important components of really checking ourselves and understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And I also really like what you said about work-life harmony, so that people are celebrated for who they are outside of work as well as at work, and if we're being authentic to ourselves and also authentic at work and doing things for the right reasons, then it sounds like success will be that much more readily accessible and a happier place to be and a better place for everyone.
Well, I think yes. And one of the things that I hear a lot from people who ask me is like, how do I get to that next level? And I know I frustrate them because I do ask, why do you want to get to the next level? Mm-hmm. And what does that next level mean to you or look like to you? Because we have a formula in our minds, right? And I got into it. I used the formula. By this time with working for a company, I have to have gone up this many levels. At this point in my career or at this age in my life, I have to have achieved X, right? And so I hear people say, well, I've been here 10 years, I need to lead a group, or I need to own a P&L, or I need to run a business. And my question always is, why? Why? Well, that's because what you're supposed to do. Like, according to who? Right? According to who? What formula are we using to drive our decisions? And and I've really come to realize the only formula that really matters is the one that's in our heart and in our head, and probably more in our heart. As long as the head and the heart are kind of in balance there. But I ask people, what brings you joy? And I know that's a weird question to ask sometimes, but because people say, well, what do you enjoy? Well, okay, well, I enjoy doing certain things, but what brings you joy? And that should be like a key part of the formula that drives what you do next in your career. And I've actually coached and mentored people out of pursuing big jobs where they were managing a bunch of people. Because when you really slow them down and get them to think about what brings them joy, that's not it. So why do it?
That's wonderful. So I'd love to ask a question, sort of bringing it back to business challenges, because I know, that's one of the reasons you're in this, because you love a good challenge. So what are some of the biggest business challenges you've faced?
Competition is fierce in the retirement space and in the financial services space. There are no shortage of competitors trying to beat us or take business away from us. And so that is, it creates pressure, right? You want to beat the competition, you want to outpace the competition, you want to keep up with the competition. But we tend to always be looking out. And so whether it's the competitors, whether it's the marketplace, whether it's the regulatory environment, we tend to always want to be looking out for validation that we are doing the right things. And certainly we look to our customers to validate that, right? But there is an element of looking within and having, the confidence and conviction of our strategy. And so it's that balance that I think is one of the biggest challenges that we have today, not just we, John Hancock, but I think business in general, is do you have a good strategy based on sound, data and analytics and information and customer feedback and insights, and then you need to execute against that strategy. And in an environment where we have like the urgency of now kind of culture, patience is a real scarce commodity. And so I talked to the team about having a patient sense of urgency, meaning, we want to be urgent about the work that we're doing and getting it right and executing well, but also understanding that things sometimes just take time to execute and materialize. And so you have to have patience. And this is really where it comes back to slowing down to speed up as well. Because one of the biggest frustrations I have is my lack of control over time. I can't speed it up, I can't slow it down, and I can't reverse it. Right? So, we have to really just make sure that we have the confidence and conviction of our strategy and the things that we're executing on, being able to articulate that clearly to the marketplace and to our internal employees, and then really being patient to allow our teams to execute on the things that they're executing on.
And that's hard when you're looking at the teams and thinking, why couldn't that have happened yesterday? Or why can't that be done in a week? I imagine that's...
Yeah, and when you get it wrong, you have to call it out. You have to be accountable and call it out that you got it wrong, and you have to be able to pivot and move in a different direction and do that in a transparent way and be able to articulate that to your employees and your customers and the other stakeholders. That's really important as well. But I do think one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is just the lack of patience with executing, and that creates an urgency that sometimes you end up making decisions that aren't the best, because they're short-term decisions, not long-term decisions. And so that's a challenge, I think.
And what tends to be your approach in handling that?
We talk about the decisions that we made, why we made the decisions, and really just continuing to have that confidence and conviction in what we're doing. So with our team, we meet weekly, we meet monthly, we meet quarterly, and on a quarterly basis we have an alignment discussion. So it's the whole team gets together and we review all the things that we've delivered, all the things that we've committed to delivering going forward, and we have the conversation. Is this still what we believe in? Do we still have the confidence and conviction in this direction? And are we all aligned around that? And so, and call it out. If someone's not aligned to it, why? What's changed in their thinking? What's changed maybe in the data, so that we make sure we have all the right inputs and updated inputs into the decision-making process. And we remind each other of why we're doing what we're doing, and making sure that we're aligned on a regular basis to that.
And have you had some big pivots on a quarterly basis as a result of the data and what your team is thinking?
Yeah, we've done a few things. We don't have big pivots on a quarter-to-quarter basis that are big strategic pivots, but we have had a couple where we were spending millions of dollars on a technology partner, and it wasn't working out well. They weren't executing as well as we needed them to. And in the meantime, some of the expectations of our business partners had shifted, and so what our partners were looking for from us had changed, and it required a pivot away from the work that we were doing. And we had put a couple $1 million into it, and so it was one of those things where people were like, well, should we just keep going because we've already spent this money, or should we pivot and go in a different direction and then basically throw that money away? And we decided to go in a different direction. It was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do for our customers. It was the right thing to do for our business partners. It was the right thing to do for our team, to show that it was okay to stop doing something that we knew wasn't going to be what our clients were looking for. And I think that's really important. It's an important lesson to demonstrate that we can get it wrong and still be okay, and still move forward in a positive direction and get going in the right direction. And so and we were really open about that, and we celebrated the team for making that decision to stop doing something and pivot in a different direction.
That's great. And it sounds like your ability to slow everyone down, to really look at the situation, enabled that decision to be made.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I didn't make that decision. I supported that decision, but that decision was made by the team. They came to me with this realization that what we had been building and spending money on wasn't going to work. it wasn't going to be the right thing to continue doing. And so we could have pushed forward, continued to sink more money into it, and delivered something to the market that nobody was going to use. And the team came back and said, no, this is the wrong thing to be doing. So what is good about that situation was that the team felt the confidence in doing that, and I didn't have to drive it.
Right.
You know, I could just be supportive, and that's also part of, I think, what I was saying earlier about my role. I really am just as much of a support structure, a support system for them as anything else that I do.
That's a great example of that. So for our last question, I'd love to ask you if you could go back to your 25-year-old self. What advice would you give yourself now?
Well, I will tell you some great advice I got from a mentor of mine when I was 23. And he said to me, he says, Patrick, never stop learning. And I took it almost too literally and said, okay, I need to continue my education, I need to get certifications, I need to read books, right? And if I really being honest with myself, I would tell that 25-year-old self what that statement really meant. It didn't mean about continuing my education in the classroom. It really meant having an appreciation that everyone that you're going to meet along the way has something to teach you, and that they know something that you don't know. I didn't learn that. I didn't really understand that advice until well into my 30s. And so, you know, that 25-year-old version of me let a lot of good people pass by without having an appreciation for who they were, without appreciating the value that they could bring to my life, my work life and my personal life. So yeah, I guess I would say, you know, get that right. Understand that for what it really was, the gift that it was, rather than taking it so literally at the time.
Right. And it sounds like in the recent years, you've learned to look inward to increase your learning as well.
You are correct.
That's wonderful.
I hadn't really thought about it that way, but well done,
Well,
Jacqueline.
what a great example of all the different ways that we can learn and grow in leadership. So, Pat, it's been a real pleasure having this conversation with you today. Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Beat, and thank you for being the leader you are.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And I will tell you the leader I have become is really an accumulation of a lot of great mentors and people that I've worked with over the years, and who have taught me really how to be, you know, a different kind of leader. And it's made it much more enjoyable. I'll tell you, this time around has been much more enjoyable and has created a really significant amount of joy for me personally.
That's great, and that's how it should be. Well, thank you, Pat.